Chapter 10 of The Caves of Fear by John Blaine. Recording is in the public domain. Reading by Matt Perard. Chapter 10 The Ambush at Lihan Huang. It was late afternoon before the Spindrift caravan left the rocks of the mountain pass and reached better ground. They paused on top of a small pyramid-shaped hill while one of the bearers retied the pack on his mule. Zircon looked at the formation with interest. "An old volcanic cone," he pointed out. "Notice the regularity of the slope? And we're in a kind of saucer that was once a live crater." Rick could see it clearly once the scientist mentioned its volcanic origin. The saucer was perhaps a dozen yards across, and its edge was marked by a definite rim. Whoever first made the trail apparently had decided to go right up and across the hill instead of pushing through the dense underbrush at its base. In a moment they started again, the mules picking their way carefully down the hillside. At the bottom of the hill was a rather dense forest, and beyond it the valley. Sing called back over his shoulder. "Lihan Huang is just past the woods. We'll meet Ko there, I think. I just saw the last of his mules going into the woods." Rick stood up in his stirrups and rubbed his raw and aching thighs. The three had ridden horseback before, but not to any great extent, and the long trail was a hard initiation. He noted that the sun was dropping behind the western peaks, and he knew from experience that it would be dark in a few minutes. The great western range was so high in the air that it brought night by blocking out the sunlight surprisingly early in the afternoon. Then he rode into the forest and gloom closed in around him. It was cold. He zipped up his windbreaker and reached for his gloves. He saw that the trail through the forest twisted and turned to miss the big hardwood trees, so that sometimes he could see only the mule in front of him. Zircon and Scotty at the rear of the column were out of sight most of the time. It grew darker rapidly. Rick reached into his saddlebag and drew out a flashlight, tucking it into his jacket pocket where it would be handy. When he could see the sky overhead, it was dark gray and he knew night was close at hand. Presently he found himself peering through the gloom, even to see the mule directly in front. When they got out of the woods it would be lighter, he hoped. Then, as he stood up again to ease his saddle burns, the woods around them were suddenly alive with gunfire. His pony reared and would have bolted if he had not gripped the reins tight and jerked him to a stop. He caught a glimpse of orange flashes in the gloom, and from ahead he heard a sudden scream from one of the mules. Scotty's voice rose in a yell. "Turn around! Turn! Get back out of the woods to the hilltop!" Rick saw his friend's strategy at once. On the hilltop they could fight off almost a battalion. He pulled his quivering pony around on the narrow trail and yelled at Sing. The guide's voice came in answer. "Coming! We're coming!" A slug whined past Rick's ear and slapped into a tree trunk. He tried desperately to get the rifle out of his saddle sheath while controlling his fear-crazed pony. Then he heard the roar of Sing's shotgun. There was no sound of firing from Scotty or Zircon, and he guessed they were having trouble with their mounts too. None of them was horseman enough to fire from the saddle. Rick stopped trying to get the rifle free and bent low, urging his pony on. Behind him he heard the pound of mule hoofs, and in the woods on both sides the rustle of underbrush as the attackers tried to keep up. The shots were fewer now, thank goodness. In a few moments the racing column broke out of the woods into better light. Ahead, Rick saw Zircon and Scotty go over the rim of the volcanic hill, and within seconds saw them reappear again on foot, rifles in hand. "Come on," Scotty yelled. "We'll cover you." Zircon's big .45-90 spoke with a decisive slam, and Rick heard the heavy slug crash through the brush. Then the mules ahead of him topped the hill, and in a moment he was out of the saddle too, rifle in hand. He joined Scotty and Zircon in time to see Sing and the other two bearers race up the hill. One mule was missing. "Hold your fire," Scotty said. "There's nothing to shoot at unless you see a muzzle flash." Sing jumped from his mule's saddle and took command. He spoke rapidly to the bearers, who at once forced the mules to their knees and then over on their sides. "So they won't get hit," Sing explained. "We lost one mule." He reloaded his shotgun, his face worried. "Did you see anyone?" Rick asked. "No, but I'm afraid for Ko. We had almost caught up when they started shooting. I saw one of his mules right ahead of me." "Let's hope he found some sort of cover," Zircon said. He glanced at the sky. "It will be completely dark within a few minutes. Sing, scatter your men around the rim. They can keep watch, even if they have no rifles. The rest of us can take up positions at equal distances from each other around the rim." Scotty adjusted his rifle sights. "Afraid of an attack after dark, Professor?" "I am. This attack probably was timed to catch us in the woods in the darkness. We're fortunate that Scotty's memory is good. Suggesting the hill was a wonderful idea." "I knew we'd be cut to pieces in the woods," Scotty said. Rick surveyed the terrain anxiously. Sing was posting his men. "A good thing they're not very expert shots," Rick said. "They took us completely by surprise." Scotty walked to the rim and found a position that suited him. "Not much danger of their hitting us except at point blank range, if their guns are like some of those we've seen." Zircon found a position too, and Rick searched for one that he liked. He finally chose a place where a broken rock pile would give him cover. It was so dark now that he could scarcely see. There were plenty of noises down the hill, but no firing. Rick waited, rifle thrust out before him. Were they gathering for a rush? And who were they? Then he heard the noise of a dislodged pebble on the hillside below him. He strained to see, but it was too dark. He thought, "If only I had the infrared light and the glasses." They were in one of the packs. Stupid not to have thought of them at once, he berated himself. Now he didn't dare leave his position until he found out what was below. There was the sound of a body sliding over low brush almost directly beneath him. He tensed, then, as an afterthought, he reached into his pocket and brought out the flashlight. With it, he thought, he could blind the attacker and at the same time get a shot at him. He put his thumb on the button and waited. In a moment, a figure loomed out of the darkness only a few feet away. Rick sucked in his breath and half lifted his rifle for a one-hand shot. At the same moment, he pressed the flashlight button. The beam shot squarely into the face of Worthington Ko. Rick put down his rifle quickly to extend a helping hand to the merchant. And then he noticed something. Shoot a light into the eyes of a man whose pupils are dilated by darkness, and there is a definite reaction. If the eyes are normal, the pupils contract sharply. One of Ko's did. Rick saw them, magnified by the thick glasses. The other pupil didn't change at all. And as the fact registered, Rick saw something else. In one of Ko's hands was a grenade. In the instant that Rick grabbed up his rifle and swung it like a club, he guessed the answer. Ko was the Chinese with the glass eye. End of chapter 10.